He didn't know she was recording his silverware. That fork held what 50 years never had. 49 years earlier, break time, 500 mems, Kristine Kozik vanished near Purdue, the midnight paradigm. Today, we reopen the 1977 murder of Kristine Kozik. We don't retell crimes here. We re-examine buried evidence. Somewhere in that fork, break time equals 400 mens, sits half a century of silence. Kristine Kozik was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania in 1957. She came west to Purdue to study speech and hearing. By spring 1977, she lived at Alpha Delta Pi. On May 5th, she borrowed a sorority sister's white Mustang. She meant to stop at a nearby fraternity house first. She planned to meet friends at a tavern. She never arrived at either destination that night. For 6 weeks, Kristine Kozik was simply gone. On June 21st, a farmer found her remains. The field sat 6 miles south of Lafayette. Decomposition kept the medical examiner from naming a cause. Investigators ruled it a homicide regardless of that gap. Within days, one name surfaced: George Thomas Keck. Keck worked as a janitor on Purdue's campus. His then-wife Anna told police something disturbing. He came home that night covered in blood, she said. Keck failed the polygraph test soon after. Yet, prosecutors never filed a single charge. Anna Keck invoked her right not to testify. This was, in our assessment, tunnel vision from day one. The case went cold, but Keck kept working nearby. There was one detail nobody connected for decades. Keck had a coworker at Purdue's janitorial staff. That coworker vanished from Lafayette the year before. Nobody thought to ask where that man went. Let's slow down and look at Keck's evidence alone. The polygraph exam is not admissible in court. It measures physiological stress, not literal guilt. Still, back in the analog days, failing one carried weight. According to the official police report, Keck was interviewed. Blood evidence from that era was rarely retested. What strikes us most, no one retested that blood later. Anna Keck's statement was never cross-examined in court. Spousal privilege meant her word stayed just an allegation. The most damning evidence became the least legally usable. Now shift perspective to Keck's quiet coworker, William Powell. In 1976, Powell cut ties with his Lafayette family. He turned up 1,600 miles away in Colorado. Boulder police filed him as an unresolved missing person. Nobody linked his file to Kristine Kozik's case. Powell simply disappeared from every official record. For 28 years, that's where the trail ended. Then in August 2004, a man surfaced in Georgia. If you think you know this case, comment below. He was found naked behind a Burger King dumpster. He claimed total amnesia and took the name Kyle. Doctors called it one of the strangest cases on record. For a decade, Benjaman Kyle became a minor sensation. He even appeared once on the Dr. Phil show. In 2015, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore took the case. Her methods matched decades-old DNA to distant cousins. The trail led straight back to Lafayette, Indiana. Kyle wasn't a stranger. He was William Burgess Powell. The missing janitor and the amnesiac were the same man. One question remained: why had he really run? Enter Shannon and Evangelista, independent documentary filmmakers. A former attorney, she'd spent 11 years on this alone. Their company, Hot Snakes Media, chased Powell's real story. They found 7 different versions of his memory list. Each account of his past contradicted the one before. As documented in the Hollywood Reporter's 2026 investigation, not accidental, his search history showed attempts to reclaim his identity. Everything about his amnesia now looked deliberately constructed, and that theory connected him back to George Keck. The filmmakers began receiving direct threats mid-investigation. They hired retired FBI agent Ken Maxwell for protection. Then Shannon made one irreversible request: dinner alone with Keck. The diner was ordinary: Formica tables, bad coffee, small talk. Keck talked for 2 hours about his life since. Then, almost casually, he described that May night himself. She swung at him. He hit her, she fell. She hit her head on a rock, he added. That is Keck's own account, filmed during the documentary. We cannot know if that account is complete truth. Before Shannon left, she kept his fork and straw. That is the DNA sample our teaser referenced earlier. As of this recording, the lab result remains sealed. But the fork was never really the whole point. The real story is what one afternoon accomplished. 49 years of subpoenas achieved less than dinner. In our assessment, independent journalism outpaced official process here. Meanwhile, the documentary made a second connection public. Powell once worked beside Keck at the same campus. But the film's real reveal involved a different girl. In 1978, 15-year-old Tracy Sue Walker vanished from a mall. She was taken from the Tippecanoe Mall in Lafayette. Witnesses saw her get into a car with older men. She was killed in Tennessee's Elk Valley region. For decades, her remains were known only as Baby Girl. Not until 2022 was her identity finally confirmed. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation renewed the appeal in 2025. Investigators now suspect the same group had other victims. One documentary just reopened 2 cold cases at once. That is a systemic pattern worth sitting with. Powell himself now faces potential accusations, including murder. Indiana law places no time limit on that charge. Oxygen's coverage of the docu-series called it unraveling fast. 7 different memory lists is not amnesia, it's authorship. A real amnesiac doesn't need 7 separate stories. The evidence suggests deliberate reinvention, not medical memory loss. He built a new identity to escape the old. That's what everyone believed. The paperwork says otherwise now. So what would you have done in Shannon's position? Steal evidence or wait another 49 years for none? The question that remains: will that DNA even matter now? Keck has never been arrested for anything, ever. The system gave him 5 decades of ordinary life. What happens next depends on the lab, not us. So why did William Powell really disappear in 1976? The documentary alleges ties to a Midwest crime family. Filmmakers argue Powell fled people, not memory itself. That is one interpretation, not a proven fact. Based on publicly available court records, nothing is charged yet. We distinguish that theory from what's actually proven here. What's proven? 2 cold cases reopened by 1 documentary. What's proven? A suspect's own words caught on camera. What's inferred? The reasons behind decades of silence. Here's the deeper pattern worth understanding for any cold case. New evidence rarely comes from bigger crime labs alone. It comes from new tech, an old file, fresh eyes. That's the formula behind most reopened cases since 2015. Genetic genealogy alone has cracked hundreds of files like this. But this case cracked without any genealogy database at all. It cracked because one producer refused to stop asking. That is, in our assessment, the real headline here. Now, the systemic picture: independent journalism is reopening old files. Indiana has no statute of limitations on murder charges. That means Keck can still face charges at 90. It also means Tracy Walker's killers could still too. Institutions had 50 years and a badge and a lab. 2 independent journalists needed 11 years and 1 dinner. That gap should make every department reconsider its own files. We don't know how the lab results will read. We do know the question won't stay sealed forever. Looking back, Kristine Kozik was 19 when it stopped. Tracy Sue Walker was 15, a cheerleader, a daughter. Both waited decades for someone to ask again. This documentary asked. Break time, 40 Emmer series. That's the entire point. Every cold case deserves that same persistence eventually. The evidence, once buried, rarely stays buried decades on. That's the quiet promise this channel keeps making. Somewhere, a lab technician is running Keck's sample now. So what would you have done at that diner table? This case waited 49 years to be asked again. Tell us in the pinned comment what you think happened. The full case file continues in next Friday's episode.